Hey, it's Jeremy from jeremy.net. I'm a comic book artist, writer, creator, and self-publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you enjoy these live streams, I'd like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month where we do deep dives into some of the best art books around, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. You also get access to a digital archive where you can read my comic books online. You get access to a Patreon exclusive Discord server where we share works in progress, give each other feedback, tips, share art tools, and general shop talk and more. There are higher tiers for higher rewards, but $2 a month is the base to get in. So head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That will forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It's a standalone psychological thriller about a man who is cursed with visions he cannot control. You can also pick up my most recent comic book series, Morning Star. Morning Star tells the story of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains issues 5 through 8. Both volumes have extensive back matter. There's page layouts, script excerpts, thumbnails, character designs, photo reference. I basically show you how I put the entire series together. So you can check out all of that at amazon.jeremy.net. And if you want to check out the books before purchasing, if you go to the homepage of my YouTube channel, there are book flip-throughs of all of those books. You can see what's inside before you pick them up. There should be links to the YouTube page in the description for this video. All right. And on that note, I know that I mentioned last week that I was expected to be done with this updated cover that I'm doing for Morningstar. However, it's one of those weeks where I spent a lot more time honestly doing figure drawing more than anything else. And so I'm going to try and wrap this up in this session. And really all I'm doing here is I'm adding some shadow to the wings. I'm going to adjust some of the actual line work colors. And then I'm going to add some environmental lighting, let some of the color of the sky spill out into the figure. So, and hey, Mercidian Merchant in the chat. Good to see you. Thanks for popping by. So let's see here. Let me load a selection. I've got selections here. It's kind of like having an alpha channel pre-saved. I'm going to use the selection for the wings. Let's zoom in here. Select that color I'm using for the shadow. And Omar's in the chat. Good to see you. Hey, hey. Omar's hanging out. Kitty and Merchant's hanging out. How are you guys doing? I hope you're having some fun doing something creative this weekend. I spent a big chunk of yesterday working on a pose from my figure drawing class that when the model took it during class, I knew it was something that was particularly challenging. And when I see something that I know is going to be hard to do, my instinct is not to say, oh, this sucks, run away. I usually am just like, ooh, all right, this is a puzzle for me. This is a chance to grow and learn. So I spent most of my creative time just working on just redrawing a particular figure drawing pose. And to be honest, if I hadn't gotten it down to where I got it yesterday, where I feel like I got pretty close, we would probably be doing that for this live stream. I'd still be working on it because I get a little bit obsessed with solving problems, which, you know, that is part of my my perfectionist tendencies, which is not a great thing, but it's also that persistence which helps me get through something like finishing an entire graphic novel. I think what it really comes down to is people often ask, like, you know, how do you do it? Whether it's, you know, finishing a whole graphic novel or studying the figure. And to me, it really just comes down to doing something that you genuinely really are passionate about. Because things you don't care that much about, you're not going to finish, because everything is hard. Life is hard. We all have stuff to do. We're all busy. So unless the thing that you're choosing to do is something that you're like, I really, 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 really want this, you're probably going to say, I've got better things to do, or things that will make me more money, or I'd rather catch up on sleep. There's all sorts of things that will stop us from finishing work or some creative passion. Let's see here. Omar mentions that I haven't practiced digital since last year. Traditional. You know, I get that. When I was working on the figure drawing stuff, I was drawing in charcoal pencil. And I do go back and forth. Like when I'm doing studies just to work on anatomy and gesture, you know, working on the fundamentals, I tend to work in charcoal pencil. But I've been doing more and more digital over the past few years. But I am missing that the joy of working traditional. So I want to try and get back into that habit myself. So I'm envious of you there. It's good that you're sticking with traditional. Digital for me works well for illustrations, for things like, you know, book covers and things where I'm going to be making a lot of revisions and changes. And I mean, just in working on this, I've made so many changes that it would have been a real pain in the ass if I had to go back and paint out and paint in again, or, you know, erase and redraw a lot of these details. But when making art just for the joy of art, yeah, it's hard to beat traditional. And digital has a lot of great, you know, obviously I'm using it. I like working digital. And also the fact that you don't have to, you know, clean up a bunch of art supplies and break down and set up a bunch of stuff before each session and at the end of each session. But that tactile nature of the medium on the surface that you're working on. Let's see here. Mercidian Merchant says, doing good, finishing up my commission reference for the artist. That's always good. When you're doing a commission, you can actually gather work to show them exactly what they want. I mean, what you want. That is always extremely helpful. And Omar says, I feel traditional will stay for a long time. I agree. I know that with the incredible number of digital tools that are out there now, some people, you know, may start learning drawing digital and they don't even get around to learn traditional until, you know, maybe they're entering college or university. But, you know, it's when you're a little kid, you can just have like crayons and pencils and whatever. I almost feel like it's funner than or more fun than starting right with the digital tools. But I think even if fewer and fewer people are using traditional, I still sort of look at it like it comes down to personal choice, personal desire, what you're really passionate about and enjoy. I think it's easier to learn the learning phase of making art is easier, I think, with traditional than with digital. I'm going to duplicate my line art here. And then I'm going to do what's called an alpha lock. And what that is, first I have to unlock this layer so I can work on it. And what an alpha lock is, there's a little tab here in Procreate, and you see it says alpha lock is checked. I mean, if you're watching this on the phone, you're not going to be able to see it, but there's a little checkbox there. And what that means is that the only thing that you can color on or paint on is a pixel that already has paint. So for instance, if I switch this to like a super bright neon blue, if I scribble over on the side, it does nothing. But if I scribble on the line art, it shows up. So this is a great way to do what I call, well, I don't call them, I did not name them, color holds. What is called in comic books a color hold is when you change the line art from black to a different color. And I'm going to do this just on the skin tones. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and take the skin tone and make it the darkest shadow skin tone and try to move that to a dark brown, but not quite black. And let's see how that looks. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing here. And this just makes the line art a little bit less, I don't know if harsh is the word, but it makes it feel a little bit more painterly without actually painting. Let's see here. Omar says, I'm 31 and I didn't reach pro level yet. I'm like, well, shit, I'm 47 and I still haven't reached pro level yet. And when I say pro level, what I mean is I am capable of producing illustrations that have a professional quality to them. But pro level is more than just the result of the work. For instance, working in comics, they use different publishing schedules in, say, European comic book models, but in the United States, it tends to be a monthly medium, meaning you're turning out 22 pages a month. So being professional is not just a matter of how well you draw, but it's also a matter of how quickly you draw. And I, for the life of me, have not reached the point where I can produce this quality of art on a monthly schedule. So that is an additional level of what I consider to be part of, it's part of the job. It's part of being a professional. It's not just doing the work, but doing it on the required schedule. And what I have found is the faster that I draw, the more the quality drops. And I think that that's true for a lot of people. But I think that when I'm working at a very fast rate, the work drops below a quality that I would be proud of. And that is something that it's a big problem for me. So it's something I continue to work at. Omar says, thank God I'm not married yet. Well, I will tell you, I'm married and I feel like my wife has been a benefit to, the level of emotional support that I have in terms of being creative is much higher than when I was single. The fact that I'm not out in those streets chasing females, believe it or not, hey, saves a lot of time. Saves a lot of time, a lot of time that's spent hanging out in bars or in the club that I could have spent just, having a nice dinner with my wife, and then going, she goes to bed or watches a little TV and I go draw. So I can't say that I mean, it depends on the person that you're with. Some partners could be. I have had relationships where the partner was, let's say, jealous of the amount of time that I spending time doing artwork. But that's how you know somebody isn't the right person for you. I wonder if I should go a little bit darker. This looks pretty nice to me. I think what I might do is just around the edges of the figure, I might go a little bit darker. With these colors. I mean, I could just fill the entire thing with this brown color instead of going back and forth. But a lot of times I find, like, I've tried that before, where I just make the whole thing a different color and then come in and make adjustments. But what I find is that it throws me more. Like, this color of brown is going to look really weird if the snake's line art is that color. And having to go in and recolor that one, as opposed to just having everything black and changing its colors from black to whatever I want it to be, is less distracting. And even this in here, on his serratus muscles and his external obliques, these could be even lighter. And I think I will come in and paint those lighter once I get the rest of his skin and face. Omar says lucky. Yes, I consider myself very, very lucky. I mean, finding somebody that suits the lifestyle of an artist is not easy, because I know that I'm not the easiest person to live with. I might seem kind of upbeat and fun with you guys, but on my own, I get very moody and very cranky. If a piece isn't working well, I'm frustrated. If I don't get enough hours in the day where I'm doing artwork, I get frustrated. And a lot of people don't want to put up with that in their life. Somebody who is a quote unquote moody artist. So I can see that as being a challenge. I don't necessarily look at it like, oh, well, that other person has to fit my lifestyle. There's things about me that are not necessarily awesome. Somebody might not want to deal with. I get that. In fact, with my when I was single, my friends and I used to always joke that I was never going to get married, because the problem is the perfect woman for me was at home reading a book and was not going to be out in the clubs anyway, so I would never run into her. And oddly enough, I ran into my wife, who rarely did not like going out to drink and socialize, but she did happen to be going out because some of her friends dragged her out one night, and it just happened to be that we met at the same place, and magic ensued. So keep your hopes up. think the main thing is just being open to possibilities when they occur. Because I certainly wasn't looking for anybody at the time that we met. I was just kind of out doing my thing. There might be places in here where I have to go darker just for better contrast. Like the armpit. The armpit, I'm going to have to paint a little bit darker in there. So this is interesting because usually when I've done color holds in the past, I've just picked a color for a certain, like flesh tones, colored hold's going to be this. Wings, color hold would be this. Gun, color hold would be this. This is rare. In that I'm looking at the skin color hold and I'm saying, oh, well, there's places here where I need to modulate this. Need to bring some places a little bit lighter, some places a little bit darker. Like all these little marks that I'm making in here, I probably shouldn't even bother doing the hand right now because I'm gonna have to come in and go darker with this. But taking the time to do the hand even in a color that's too light, what it is doing for me is that it's giving me some contrast so that when I come back in, I can look and say, all right, how much darker do I need to go? Or the fact that as I go over here to the knuckle side of this hand, same color tone, but now it's too dark as opposed to too light. All right. So skin done in general. And looking at this like full screen now, or even zooming in a little bit to the torso, looking at it full screen, what this does is it gives me a chance to look at this and say, all right, what jumps out at me? On the face, which still has the black lines, that's definitely going to have to be darker because I think, you know what? Let's just go ahead and do the face here. See, the line of the cheekbone practically vanishes because of the shadows that are here in the face, because his face is in shadow. All of these go almost completely black. So it's probably better for me to undo. Maybe on the light side of his face, this cheekbone right here. In fact, that is a very sensible approach. It's just look at this and look at my lighting and say, all right, the parts of his face that are in light get hit with the lighter line art. And as the face turns into shadow, it gets hit with the dark. It's real simple. Just letting the lighting guide you, which is something that I didn't think of that consciously when I started doing this line art. But now as I look at it, I'm like, it's a very common sense approach. Just let the lighting guide you. So yeah, if you look at that, very simple. Areas that are in light, the colors get lightened up. Let's say lit up. Light your ass up. But I think that it's still going to need those dark lines, those black lines for the shadow area. So when I look at this at full figure, what jumps out at me is that I need to go even lighter on the right side of his torso, that lower part, and I need to go darker in his armpit. And I don't know if you guys ever do this, but sometimes this might be boring for you, but sometimes I just need to sit and look at a piece for a minute. And because what that does is I'm just evaluating. I'm sitting here and I'm saying what feels right, what feels wrong, and not necessarily do whatever the knee-jerk reaction is, or just keep working mindlessly. It's to sit here and say, all right, what is the next phase to develop this drawing? Because to be honest, I don't need to go in and keep refining the skin tones. I could just move on and do the pants. Because I'm going to do the same thing with the pants, the snake. The pants actually feel like they probably shouldn't get too much of a tweak. I'm going to keep those lines closer to dark, because closer to black, only because that will help make the skin tone stand out as a separate material. In fact, just by coloring the line art, I kind of give it the sensation or the feeling, the translucency that skin has, because our skin, brighter or darker, still does not just absorb light. It's not like it's just a solid material that light reflects off of. To a certain degree, all light penetrates the upper surfaces of the skin and bounces out. On darker skins, we absorb more light. Lighter skins reflect more light. But the point is that light still enters the skin surface and then comes back out. And so making these lines not as black helps to enforce that feeling. So I'm going to go in here now and I am going to lighten this slightly. Like, I really like using this, using the color wheel, the way it's got that little slot there to show you the difference between what you currently have selected and what you're going to change to, because I want to make this just light enough that it's a noticeable change, but I don't want it to be so light that it joins the skin tones. For instance, as you can see here, I'm going into this arm now and I'm painting this lighter. This light that I'm painting here is almost as light as the shadow that's running down the outside of the arm. And I don't want to go any lighter than that, because then you're going to start having your shadows and lights fight with each other. And I don't want my shadows and lights to fight with each other. I want them to collaborate. I'm undoing this because I'm trying to decide if I want to leave those lines darker just because it's the outside of the figure. Let's start with the area that I know I needed to lighten up, which is right here, the lats. The external obliques first. See, because as I lighten up these lines right here in the side of the torso, it almost disappears. In fact, this is exactly what I was saying. This line right here, it's the same color as these shadows. I think I just need the lines to be in the highlight area. Again, using what I just learned in drawing the face, which is if I'm going to lighten this up and part of the forms turn into shadow, maybe just do that lightening just in the area that's getting some light. See how this looks on the knuckles. Yeah, I was going to try and leave the outer edge a little bit darker, but there on that torso, I think it helps to have this lighter color. And we lose it on the face. Yeah, I don't want to do that on the face. Now I'm going to come back and maybe darken in some of those lines. Let's say, take this right here, this underside of the pectoralis, and I'm going to darken this at this point. It's damn near black. You might not even be able to tell the difference between this and black. But it's a very, very dark brown. I'm just using this to kind of differentiate this region where the form is really turning away from the light. Maybe come back and paint that in here, separating the thumb. All of a sudden, the thumb is popping back a little bit more. I don't want to go all the way to black, but just darkening in these outside forms. see here. Now in the armpit here. And the thing is, I don't really want the armpit to stand out. It's not the point here. I just want it to have sort of the right balance of value, because going in and painting those colors, coloring the line art there, changed the value. It's a little bit imperfect here. I can see that I'm putting lines over the snake, but I'm going to do a whole pass where I'm just coloring the snake's skin tone, so I'm not going to worry about that. I'll be able to clean that up then. So these lines are not quite black, but they are darker, and they are making the division between forms, you know, armpit and upper arm, fist and forearm, just making those divisions a little bit more prominent. All right. I think that that is good for that part, only in the sense that I know myself and I could just keep working and reworking it. And I really need to let it go, move on to other parts, and then see what bothers me later and come back to it then. So, like I said, with the pants, I'm going to try and keep those closer to black. So what I am going to do, this is my methodology. I pick my dominant shadow color. So in the pants here, it's this this very dark gray, tan gray. And from here, I take this color. I try not to shift the hue. Well, actually, no. Sometimes if I want to cool down a shadow, that's usually what I do. If I'm doing a shadow, I'll try to make it cooler. But in this case, I'm not really shifting the hue because the changes I'm trying to do are subtle. But from this color, now I'll use that little split window where I can see how dark I'm making it. And I'm going to try and make this thing a color that is noticeably darker than the shadow. So when I color the line art this color, you'll notice the difference, but still not going all the way to black. And I will tell you that this change is a very subtle change. If I come in here now and color this line art, well, I mean, it's not so subtle. It actually does kind of jump a lot. You can kind of tell I might need to go darker than this. Because like I said, this feels more like kind of what I did with the skin tone, where the color practically blends in and you really don't it doesn't separate the material as much from his skin tones. So I think I actually do want to go a little bit darker than this. Well, actually, in looking at this, who knows? Maybe I want to, if I go do the same approach where some areas it's lighter and some areas it's darker, like up here on the upper side, which would be facing the light, this actually might be just the right color. And then go even darker on the underside. That's a good point. I was going to switch and just go darker overall, but I think this might work better. I can come back in here and hit all of this with a darker color around the edges. I'm going to have to compare it once I've got this all colored. I'm going to have to compare it to the skin tone, because the thing that I was worried about was just if this line art is too light, then it'll feel almost like his skin and the pants are of the same material. I'm kind of repeating what I just, what I said earlier in the video. But just that this translucentness that a colored line art gives, that effect, that I want to keep that more focused in the skin tones and not so much in the fabric. In the clothing and all of the other non-organic materials. So let's see there. I like that, but I do need to go darker, I think. And while I'm at it, let me do the hat. Let's get his hat while we're up here. It actually gives a nice contrast, going back and forth between black line art and then colored line art. So you got the hat, then it goes to the black of his hair and the black of the lines in his face, and then going back into the color of the skin, and then also breaking it up with the wristband that he has, that having black line art. It's a nice back and forth. But I'm going to come in here on these pants and go a little bit darker. I'm going to try and have those darks concentrated on the underside of the figure. To help reinforce that sense of shadow. I mean, at this point, I'm actually kind of coloring more by feel. It's kind of like a lot more like painting than inking. I'm just looking at it and saying what needs to feel darker, what needs to feel lighter. And that I know may not necessarily be incredibly useful if you're working on a piece and you're struggling, you're not sure what to do. I'm like, well, how do I know what it's supposed to feel like? There's a certain intuition, an artistic intuition. That same thing that makes you criticize your work when you say, oh, this sucks, this is bad. The same thing that where negative self-talk comes from when you're making art. Believe it or not, you can turn that force around and use it for good. You can turn that force around and say, all right, if you feel something that does not feel good, that feels unhelpful in your work, to look at those sensations, to look at the areas where you're feeling that and say, and just really ask yourself, what is the opposite of that? If you can identify what it is that feels wrong, if something is too dark, it needs to be lighter. If something is too long, it needs to be shorter. If something is too warm, then make it cooler. Being able to identify the nature of your criticisms, your discontent with a particular part of a piece, is an integral tool for diagnosing and fixing and improving your artwork. And now as I'm looking at this, I'm kind of saying I really am hesitant to do much to the line art that's black on like the holster and the boots, because that black really helps it stand out. Let's jump to the snake. Actually, you know what? Let's do the wings, because the wings are one that I really intended to make the line art significantly lighter than it is. So let's take that and let's see. I think it's gray enough. I don't need to desaturate it. Let's just move it down, down. So in the fact that it's all the way to black, I can go pretty gray and it'll still be a significant difference. That's a pretty dark gray, and it's still really, I'm going to zoom out to do this with a large brush so I can kind of hit a lot of this at once. So you can see the gray that I'm using is a pretty dark gray, but the thing that I'm coloring is a light thing. So pushing it to this gray is not as a dramatic change as it is with it. Well, I mean, it's a dramatic change in the sense that it really makes these wings feel less drawn on by moving this lighter color. It makes it kind of, it unifies the wing line art with the color and the shadows that are painted into it. Pushing them closer in value really helps unify them. And I kind of wanted to zoom out to get that feel. Now I can kind of come in with a smaller brush and just get the areas where I want to paint around the hair, paint around the figure, make sure I don't accidentally paint over some line art that I don't want to. Basically just finding the areas of overlap in places where it meets a different material and being more careful with that, like here where the wings meet the shoulder. And the reason why I'm not using the selection masks that I have is because the selections themselves, the flat color that's here, the line art is kind of, the line art is not necessarily completely inside of that. So I might end up where half of the line will get colored, or get the color hold, and then half of it will still be black. I want to make sure I get the whole thing, so I'm just going in like this. And I could make sure I get the whole thing by making my selections so that they include both the line art and the flat area, the colors. But when making those selections, then if I go and I make some major changes to the line art, sometimes I don't want those things. I want the line art to cover the seam between the filled area of color and the other areas of color around it. Like if I turn off both of these line arts, this seam, like if we look at this all together with the line art turned off, as you can see, the actual areas of color, they're chunky and ragged, and the line art is covering those chunks. And if I had it so that the line art, if I had it so that the colors underneath completely matched and filled the line art, it means I would have to make all these different color areas much more precise selections, which is going to slow me down for what in my mind is a minor benefit. I mean, I'm sure there's a world in which the time savings of being able to just go through and just magic wand and fill each of these colors, these line areas, and just change it perfectly is worth it. But for now, this is just what makes the most sense to me. But I look at the workflow of other creators, other illustrators, and who knows, somebody might have a trick, a Procreate trick that are like, oh no, do your flats this way. This is so much more efficient. Or, you know, ways to set up your files. So it's not always about the drawing. Sometimes it's about technical things, setting up your files in certain ways, setting up your layers in certain ways. And I try to keep my eye out for tricks and tools that other creators have. And if I see something cool, I'll mention it here, and I give a shout out to whoever's channel or whatever website I learned it from. Like I learned how to basically color. I learned basically how to use Procreate from Color with Kurt, his YouTube channel. He is a professional comic book colorist. And even though I think for a lot of his videos, he mostly uses Clip Studio Paint now, you know, he had tons of tutorials on how to color in Photoshop. And he had a Procreate period where he was doing a bunch in Procreate. I was watching him and Michael Henry, watching their YouTube channels. And they taught me a lot about some best practices for doing illustrations in Procreate. As I'm looking now, I can see little places where the pixels are off and I didn't completely fill in a color or there's stray marks. But I think these are things that when it comes to the final piece, they aren't really going to be noticeable. So I don't feel the need to come in and fix all of those. So these wings really push back quite a bit now. And that works for me. I'm good with that. So, and I don't know if I'm going to change the line art on the gun because I feel like the solid black line art on the gun actually really works. But speaking of the gun, I'm going to come back here on his hand, just go a little bit darker. Right in here, this feels like this just needs to stand out a little bit more. And this is one of those things where, like I was saying about having to know what the piece needs, if you were to observe a hand doing this in real life in this lighting scenario, it may well be that the colors in the shadow might be a little bit more neutral. And I'm choosing to make these shadows a little bit darker to make contrast between the hand and the forearm and the hand and the gun itself. see here. And I'm thinking I could start painting a little bit more lighting around the edges, but what I really want to do is save that for, because when I start painting a glow of light around him, that's going to change a lot. And I don't want to get too caught up in lighting around the edge of the figure when a lot of that lighting is going to come from the environment. So I'm going to switch to the snake now. I'm going to go to this dark green and go to a darker, slightly less saturated green. Let's see how this looks. See down here, that color that I thought, oh, wow, that works right. That color disappears into the shadows around the jaw. So this color will probably be fine for the lighter areas, the snake. But down here in the jaw, I'm going to have to come in with something a little bit darker. Now, this is an area where it might actually be useful for me to use those selections, because all of this is overlapping with areas of different color. By the way, we are at about 58 minutes. And usually our runtime is about an hour. So if anybody has any closing questions, now is the time to shoot them. And if not, I'll just work on the snake here for a few more minutes, and then we'll bring this stream to a close. I'll also have to decide if I want to use the same tone for the underside of the snake as I do for the top, because the underside is a cooler, bluer green. It's a paler color. It's a very pale blue-green on his underbelly versus the very bright green on the top. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint it the color that I'm currently using. And then, like I've been doing with the rest of it, see how I feel. Paint it, look at the whole thing, and course correct. Like, it would save a lot of time if every single decision I just knew what the color was that I wanted and I just painted it and moved on. And there are some artists who have that level of foresight or they just commit to whatever their instinct is, or they don't have time in their schedule to dick around and try different options. And to be fair, I probably shouldn't be dicking around trying different options. I should just be moving on. I complain about not having enough time to do all the things I want to do, and yet most of my time is spent trying variations of things. But that's usually how I figure out what I really want. I rarely know exactly what I want at any given stage of a piece. I just try stuff and I'm like, oh, that worked, or ooh, not so much. And then course correct. And maybe if I continue at this, constantly working, constantly trying, to do different things, trying different color approaches, line art approaches, compositional approaches, that I will develop that assuredness or that confidence that when I set up a piece that I know, nope, this is what I want, move forward, finish it, just execute. And then maybe I will become like super lightning fast. But at the moment, lots of trial and error. I say that only because I'm hoping that if you feel like you're doing stuff and you get frustrated that pieces aren't coming out right, that knowing that it does that for some people, it's different for everybody, but for some people, it not coming out right in the beginning or even in the second or third attempt, for some people, that is the process. Because, yeah, I really do wish I could just draw brilliant stuff out of my head every single time and pick the perfect colors every single time. That, unfortunately, is not the process I have. And like I said, maybe someday I will get there. But knowing that even if you don't have the process that you want or the results that you want, trying to find ways to make satisfying work with the process you do have and the tools that you do have available, that maybe that can be enough for now. And you keep working and trying to improve, and hopefully someday you will get to that place where you want to be. Or maybe you'll always just have a long, wonky ass process. It's not the worst thing in the world. Yeah, I am going to have to come in with a darker green on the undersides, but overall, I think this is working. But I do, considering how much overlap there is there and that it takes extra concentration, I think I am just going to paint the sides that are in light and then just switch to this darker color, because it's a little bit too much of having to, knowing that I'm going to do this and then have to come back and certain spots come in again with darker. I think I'm just going to hit, like I can show you the upper part of the snake tail over here where there's highlights up on his shoulder as it curves around and then have it go into darkness. Those are the places I'm gonna hit with light. And even though there doesn't really seem to be light here, I'm gonna come and maybe try it on this outer part of the underbelly of the snake. And then as it curves back towards the inside of his body, let that go into darkness. And then the rest of those do with a darker green. So yeah, this was all color holds this session. Still didn't get around to doing the environmental light, and maybe I'll finish that over the course of the week. Maybe I'll get nothing done an illustration, and we'll be right back here when we start next week. We'll see. All right, guys. So again, thank you for hanging out, for watching the live stream. Thank you for everybody who popped into the chat. Good to see you, Omar. Good to see you, Mercadian Merchant. Again, if you enjoy these live streams, if you find them interesting, inspiring, giving you ideas, or you just want to be able to ask more questions, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Gets you access to 2 bonus live streams per month. They are extra long, 2.5, 3.5 hours long, sometimes longer. We do deep dives into some of the best art books around, so you get more access into my actual personal artistic study to improve my craft, and just generally being able to hang out and talk. For as little as $2 a month, you get in. You go to patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. You also get access to a digital archive where you can read my comic books online. You get access to a Patreon exclusive Discord server where we share tips, feedback, art talk, favorite tools, and more. Patreon.com/GERIMI. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, work in progress images gifts delivered right to your inbox, you sign up for my free monthly newsletter, newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you would like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, if you read digitally on Comixology or Kindle, well, Comixology is gone. It's just Kindle now. You go to amazon.jeremy.net. I'll forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It's a standalone book, psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can pick up my most recent project, Morning Star. It's Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, but told as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains issues 5 through 8. Both volumes have extensive back matter. There's script excerpts, photo reference, character designs, layouts, thumbnails. I basically show you how I put the entire book together. And there are book flip throughs on the homepage of my YouTube channel. If you want to see what's inside the books before you pick them up, head on over to youtube.com/GERIMI. You can check those out there. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate your time. Hope to see you next week. Hit that like button. Hit that share button. If you're a new watcher, hit that subscribe button. And I'll see you guys next week. That's it for now. Go be creative.